A 7-year-old guest started sobbing on live TV, but Johnny's next move will restore your faith. October 26, 1978, Studio One in Burbank, California. Johnny Carson had just launched into his monologue. The audience was howling. Ed McMahon was delivering his trademark thunderous laugh. Everything was, as always, exactly where it should be. The king was the most unflappable man on television, a master of control who could tame any wild guest and deflect any professional disaster with a twinkle. But then it came. It started as a tiny, hitching whisper from the darkness of the last few rows. Then it grew quickly into a desperate, wretched sob that felt utterly alien to the polished environment. The audience laughter passed away suddenly, uncomfortable. Faces turned. Ed McMahon's smile faded into sheer, confused panic. Johnny's eyes flickered past the camera lens. He was trained to ignore anything that broke the fourth wall. But this was different. This was pure, undeniable, childlike distress. It was the sound of total emotional collapse. Every professional instinct told him to keep going. The control booth was already screaming in his earpiece, "Cut! Commercial! Get security in there!" The show was the biggest moneymaker on late-night television, and every second of unplanned silence cost the network tens of thousands of dollars. For Fred DeCordova, the executive producer, this was a 5-alarm professional emergency. He was shouting, but Johnny didn't listen. His focus was absolute. He let the silence hang, thick and heavy, settling over 20 million American homes. He gently lowered his microphone stand, his eyes fixed on the source. The camera lights illuminated the back corner of the theater, revealing a young woman holding a small boy, perhaps 6, whose face was completely buried in her shoulder. The boy's shoulders were shaking violently, his grief vibrating through the entire silent auditorium, demanding attention. The producers scrambled, ready to send security, ready to pretend it never happened. But the cameras, sensing the sudden, powerful shift from comedy to raw drama, stayed locked. They zoomed in just enough to show the scene, a mother whose face was etched with exhaustion and apology, and a child whose small body seemed overwhelmed by sorrow. The boy was clutching something tightly against his chest, a small, dark object that looked like a toy. It was the centerpiece of his profound sadness, a mystery waiting to be solved. Johnny Carson stood on his mark for 5 seconds. 5 seconds that felt like an hour of real time, listening to the desperate, hiccuping cries of the boy. Then, the man who never broke character, the man famous for his emotional armor, did the single most unbelievable thing anyone in that studio had ever seen. He didn't make a joke. He didn't call for a break. He started walking. He walked right off his mark, past the edge of the stage, and headed straight into the audience. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a man making a crucial decision, knowing millions were watching. He was walking toward the boy. The world stopped spinning for the audience and the production crew. They watched as the king of late night sacrificed millions of dollars of airtime to address one small, grieving human being. They watched as the man, known for his polished distance, chose human connection over professional duty. When Johnny Carson finally reached the mother and the small boy, he knelt down slowly, lowering himself to the child's level. He looked at the distressed boy's face, gently pulled away from his mother's embrace, and asked him a question. A simple question that would echo across America for decades. Now the cameras were panicking, unable to follow him properly. Only the mother and the distraught little boy heard the question. But the reply, high and frantic, was perfectly clear enough to be heard by every microphone in the vicinity, carrying the full weight of a shattered 6-year-old heart. "It's broken, Mr. Carson. My dad said you could fix anything." The moment those words, "It's broken, Mr. Carson. My dad said you could fix anything," left the child's lips, the mystery of the sobbing was instantly solved, replaced by a tragedy that was profoundly personal, yet utterly relatable to everyone watching. Johnny Carson, still kneeling on the carpet between the folding chairs, had dropped his comedic mask completely. The king of late night was now just a sympathetic neighbor, trying to understand a small boy's pain. The producer in Johnny's ear was insistent, demanding he return to the stage. But Johnny, with the sheer force of his attention, silenced the world around him. He gently pulled the small, dark object from the boy's tight grasp. It wasn't just any toy. It was a miniature model of the Apollo lunar module, the kind of detailed plastic kit beloved by children of the 1970s. But the tiny, delicate landing strut was snapped clean off, and the main flag decal was peeled away, giving the whole thing a weary, battle-scarred look. "What's your name, buddy?" Johnny asked, his voice low and raspy. "Ethan," the boy replied, hiccuping, rubbing the tears and snot from his face with the back of his hand. His mother, visibly shaking, finally found her voice. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Carson. He's 6. We tried to get him to stop. We drove 600 miles today just to be here. I'm Sarah." Johnny nodded, never taking his eyes off the boy. He understood the drive, the desperation to make a child happy. He turned the little lunar module over and over in his hand, feeling the sharp edge where the plastic had fractured. This wasn't just a toy to Ethan. This was a symbol. Sarah, sensing the moment of genuine connection, leaned in to whisper the backstory. Ethan's father, Michael, a marine aviation mechanic, was deployed 6 months ago to a high-risk area. He was due home in 3 weeks. He had given Ethan the model before he left, a symbol of their shared love of space and a promise. He told Ethan, "Just like those astronauts, I'm coming home. And if anything breaks while I'm gone, take it to the cleverest man in the world, Johnny Carson. He can fix anything with a wink and a smile." The depth of the broken dream hit Johnny instantly. This wasn't about a toy, it was about a promise. It was about a 6-year-old trying to hold on to the last tangible piece of his absent hero. When that piece snapped, Ethan hadn't just felt profound sadness. He felt the fragility of his entire world. He hadn't just felt intense pain from a broken toy. He felt immense sorrow from a broken connection. This single tiny break symbolized the massive, heartbreaking distance between the boy and his father. Johnny looked at the model, then at Ethan's tear-streaked, hopeful face. The sheer weight of that simple statement, "My dad said you could fix anything," forced the most important man in Hollywood to look past the cameras and see the devastating simplicity of a child's faith. He suddenly realized he couldn't deflect this. He couldn't joke his way out of this. He had to be the man the marine mechanic had told his son he was. He had to be the hero, not the host. He stood up slowly, the lunar module resting safely in his palm. He looked at the vast, silent audience, and then he looked directly at the main camera lens, addressing 20 million Americans as if they were just sitting in his living room. "Folks," he said, his voice quiet but commanding, the comedy completely gone. This was not just plastic. It was a miniature Apollo command module, a tiny representation of mankind's greatest promise, the ability to overcome impossible distances and safely return home. The damaged landing strut was, to Ethan, the broken faith in that universal promise. We're going to take a moment here. This little guy drove 600 miles because his dad, who is serving our country, told him I could fix this. He held up the broken module, letting the cameras catch the damaged landing strut. "I can't fix it right now, but I will make a promise to Ethan, and to his dad, wherever he is watching tonight." This was the king breaking protocol. This was the moment the comedy ended, and the heart began to lead the show. He looked back at Ethan and Sarah, his gaze firm. "I promise you, Ethan, this isn't just going to be fixed. My people and I are going to make this the finest lunar module in the entire world. And you and your mother are coming back here next week to see it, and we are going to make sure your dad sees it too." The intensity of his stare left no doubt that the promise was ironclad. That promise, made live on national television, was more profound than any joke Carson had ever delivered. He didn't offer a cash reward or a public gesture. He offered his personal attention and the vast, unseen resources of The Tonight Show to repair a broken symbol of a father's love. Now, with the boy still slightly trembling but no longer crying, Johnny turned back to the audience, the show needing to proceed, but the emotional truth of the night now permanently shifted. As the commercial break finally slammed the show to black, the tension in Studio One didn't vanish. It merely shifted, condensing around the tiny 6-year-old boy and the most powerful man in television. In that private vacuum of commercial silence, the true, heartbreaking secret of Ethan's journey to Burbank finally unfolded. The network executives, pale and flustered, tried to escort Sarah and Ethan out, worried about the protocol Johnny had shattered. But Johnny, ignoring them completely, remained kneeling beside Ethan, still holding the fractured lunar module in his hand. He asked Sarah, the mother, to tell him everything, not for the cameras, but for himself. And Sarah, realizing she wasn't talking to a celebrity but to a genuinely kind man, finally allowed the floodgates of her own emotional turmoil to open. She explained that her husband, Michael, was deployed with a Marine aviation unit to an area in the South Pacific known for intense fighting. He was due home in 3 weeks. This tiny plastic model was the only thing that had helped Ethan count down the days. Every night, she explained, they had a ritual. They would watch The Tonight Show together. Michael had grown up watching Johnny, and it was the single, consistent thing that connected the three of them. Sarah's voice cracked as she admitted that, for Ethan, the broken toy wasn't just a simple mistake, it was a devastating premonition. The little boy feared that if the toy was broken, the promise that his dad would return home safely, was also broken. The tears that flowed down Sarah's face were the tears of a military spouse carrying the crushing weight of separation and anxiety. She confessed that Ethan had been inconsolable for 2 periods after the model snapped, refusing to eat. In a desperate to rekindle his faith, she had spontaneously driven the 600 miles from San Francisco, using their last spare money to buy 2 rush tickets, simply because Michael had told Ethan that Johnny could fix it. She never intended for the sorrow to erupt on live television. Johnny listened to the whole story, silent, focused. He realized the depth of the symbolism. He wasn't being asked to repair plastic. He was being asked to repair the integrity of a father's promise and the core of a child's trust. The weight of this quiet request was immense. He looked from Sarah, whose eyes held desperate gratitude, to Ethan, who was now just gazing up at his hero, waiting for the magic word. At that moment, the producers called out that they had 30 seconds until they went back on air. Johnny stood up, holding the tiny, broken lunar module. He gently took the boy's hand and, without a single word to the panicked crew, led him and his mother to the edge of the stage. But Ethan, calmed now, but still clutching the pen Carson had given him, looked up at him again. "Mr. Carson," he whispered, his voice small but clear. "Will my dad know? Will he know you're fixing it?" Johnny stopped, mid-stride, right where the camera boom could catch the sudden change in his face. He turned and looked down at the boy, and the expression was one of absolute, resolute devotion to this tiny, private mission. He gave the mother a quick, reassuring nod, a silent vow to fix this. If this powerful story of Johnny Carson's secret kindness and the single promise he kept that changed a family forever resonated with you, don't let the conversation end here. We invite you to subscribe to our channel now to unlock more exclusive stories about the profound human moments behind the most iconic legends. Johnny Carson didn't just nod. He knelt one last time, ignoring the 10-second countdown in his earpiece, and promised Ethan that his dad would absolutely know. That promise would require the king of late night to make phone calls far outside the usual Hollywood circuit, pulling strings and deploying resources that no television host was ever meant to touch. The show was back on air, but the real, secret drama of the evening was now unfolding off-camera, behind the thick velvet curtain of the star's private office. Johnny Carson, the man who spent his life avoiding confrontation and emotional display, was now focused with surgical intensity on a single, selfless mission, honoring a little boy's hope. The lunar module model sat on his enormous desk, dwarfed by the silver photograph frames and presentation awards. It was no longer just a toy. It was a sacred artifact of a father's promise. Johnny immediately called his head of production, Fred DeCordova. Johnny didn't ask, he commanded. He needed the best model maker, the finest prop master, the kind of genius who usually built miniature spacecraft for Hollywood films, and he needed them tonight. The assignment was simple: rebuild the broken piece with a jeweler's precision, ensuring the integrity of the original toy remained intact. This was about more than just glue. It was about respect. Johnny was determined that the repaired module should look so perfect that when Ethan's father, Michael, saw it, he would know the promise made to his son had been upheld with the utmost care. He emphasized that the toy must feel like the original, worn and beloved, but the broken component had to be flawlessly restored. The prop master, an older craftsman named Al, arrived within the hour. Carson dismissed the idea of replacing the entire model. "No, Al," Johnny insisted. "You have to fix his ship, the one his dad gave him." While Al packaged the model, Johnny made the second, far more complicated call, to Washington. He called a personal contact, a former Navy man now working high up in the Department of Defense. He explained the entire, unbelievable story, skipping none of the emotional detail. The goal was to reach Sergeant Michael, and to support him in a way that showed the father that his sacrifice and the impact of his absence on his child mattered deeply to the American people. Johnny didn't ask for a public message. He asked for a private, dedicated satellite hookup. He wanted Ethan to be able to talk to his father, to show him the repaired ship, and to let Michael know confidentially that his family was being looked after. He made it absolutely clear: this must remain between the family and his own private circle. No press, no publicity. The promise was made. The military would locate Sergeant Michael, discreetly inform his command, and arrange for a secure, private communication line from the base to Burbank within the next 2 weeks. The Tonight Show continued. The guests came and went, but for Johnny Carson, the night had been fundamentally hijacked by a 6-year-old boy. As he signed off, the lunar module was already being carefully taken apart and analyzed by the best hands in the business. The king of late night had set a secret machinery in motion, a quiet, powerful engine of kindness that would span oceans and transform a broken piece of plastic into a symbol of enduring love. For 2 weeks, the little lunar module lived a secret life, hidden away in a high-security workshop. It wasn't merely glued back together, it was reinforced, lovingly touched by master craftsmen who understood this project carried the weight of a sacred promise. Finally, the day of the return arrived. Sarah and Ethan were brought back as private, highly protected guests. They were escorted backstage, straight to Johnny's office. Ethan, clutching the gold pen, was quiet, his huge eyes darting around the chaos. Johnny met them. On his desk, under soft light, sat the Apollo lunar module. It was perfect. The prop master had reinforced the entire structure. The toy was still Ethan's, still worn, but utterly whole. Ethan ran past his mother and stopped at the desk. His small, worried face, consumed by sorrow, broke into a blinding, genuine smile. He finally picked up the ship. "It's fixed," he breathed. Sarah, tears of sheer gratitude falling, understood this was an act of grace. Johnny watched the boy's happiness. Then, he delivered the second, more important part of the promise. He guided Ethan and Sarah to a small, isolated screening room deep within the NBC facility. On a large, old-fashioned monitor, the grainy image of a distant military base appeared. Sergeant Michael, Ethan's father, walked into view, tired but perfectly in uniform. The static-laced image was blurry, yet there was no mistaking the face. Michael, who had been informed only moments before about the connection, looked stunned. Ethan dropped the repaired lunar module, which didn't break this time, and ran toward the monitor. The tears were back, but this time they were tears of pure, overwhelming joy. Joyous, cathartic sight, spanning 7,000 miles. Ethan, oblivious to the technology, spoke from the heart. "Daddy, look! Mr. Carson fixed it. He fixed the ship." Michael, the Marine hardened by months of deployment and separation, his military bearing cracked, replaced by the profound emotion of a father seeing his child finally whole again. His voice, clear and trembling, came through the speakers. "Oh, son, that is the best ship I've ever seen. You see, Daddy told you Mr. Carson was the cleverest man in the world." The conversation was simple, brief, and sacred. Sarah watched her husband and son reconnecting across an ocean of separation. The profound silence of the screening room amplified the emotion, giving them a moment the world could never provide. Johnny Carson stood just outside the door, guarding privacy. Michael's simple thank you relayed through Sarah. "Tell Mr. Carson thank you, not for the ship, but for seeing my son. Tell him he didn't just fix a toy, he fixed a family." That phrase struck Johnny. The sight of that small boy's transforming into joy was worth more than $100 million in ratings. The promise was kept. As the connection drew to a close, Michael managed a crisp salute. Ethan blew a clumsy kiss. Johnny then stepped in, shook Sarah's hand, and confirmed their travel details home. He then asked for the father's contact information after Michael returned from deployment. He simply said, "Just in case I need to get in touch with him for a joke idea." What part of Johnny Carson's secret kindness struck you the hardest? Share your favorite moment from the story in the comments below. The family departed soon after. Johnny Carson, forever protective of his anonymity, never spoke publicly of the event, but the silent promise he had just made to himself was far more impactful. He would make certain this family's return to normalcy was not only emotional, but also secure. The show went on, but for Johnny Carson, the incident remained a quiet, burning ember. He was the most intensely private man in show business, yet he felt a profound, private responsibility to the family. The conversation with Sarah had revealed the deeper truth, the financial cloud of medical bills related to her mother's chronic illness. Carson couldn't just fix a toy. He began setting up an anonymous framework through a private attorney. It wasn't about a cash exchange, it was about establishing stability. He quietly established a college fund for Ethan, designed to mature in 20 years, enough to cover tuition. He wanted the provision to be absolutely unconditional and untraceable. The attorney was sworn to permanent silence. Carson also reached out to the Department of Defense contact again, not to check on Michael, but to ensure that Sarah's mother received the best possible medical consultation available. This was the quiet, unsung legacy. Change enacted using influence, not fame. 4 years passed quickly. Ethan was now 10, his father home safely. The little lunar module sat prominently on a shelf. One Tuesday morning, an official-looking envelope arrived. It was from a California trust company. Sarah opened the document, her hands trembling. It detailed the establishment of a substantial educational trust fund, fully paid and protected. At the bottom of the formal paperwork, typed out cleanly in the instructions section, was a single, cryptic 12-word message, with no signature, only the looping familiar initial J. This was the quiet, personal payoff, the single proof she needed that the promise made on live television was just the beginning of Johnny Carson's commitment. The formal documents were cold and legal, yet Sarah's hands shook as she held them. The college trust was real, significant, and utterly transforming. She stared at the bottom of the page. "You made me remember what matters. Keep laughing until he's home for good." The looping initial J confirmed the source. The king of late night had reached across 4 silent years. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. She understood the trust fund was a profound tribute to the vulnerability Ethan had shown. The terms of the trust were simple, yet demanding. Total silence. Sarah was effectively sworn to secrecy. To tell anyone would be to risk disrespecting the profound private intention of the gift. The money was simply the physical manifestation of Michael's promise. When Michael returned, he understood the true magnitude of Carson's intervention. It wasn't just about an astronaut toy, it was about dignity. Michael sat down, reading the message again. Carson had ensured the family was protected regardless of what happened overseas. He looked at his son, Ethan, now strong and confident. Johnny Carson had acted as a quiet guardian angel. They honored the anonymity Carson had demanded, choosing instead to live the quiet, secure life Carson had engineered for them. The simple fact of Ethan's future being guaranteed was the foundation of a new, unbroken life. Decades later, in 1992, the moment finally arrived when Johnny Carson signed off the air for the final time. The tribute was enormous, the farewell sentimental, yet throughout the broadcast, Michael and Sarah sat watching at home with their now teenage son, celebrating the man who was, in secret, a quiet, powerful hero. On May 22, 1992, the night Johnny Carson signed off the air, Michael, Sarah, and their son, Ethan, now 16, gathered around the television. As the cameras panned over the audience for the final emotional time, a man stood up. The camera operator held the shot. The man was holding the original repaired Apollo lunar module. It was Ethan. He hadn't sought attention, not even a whisper of recognition. He had simply wanted to show his hero that the promise had endured. The lunar module was testament to the night Johnny Carson chose, humanity over celebrity. When Johnny finally finished his beautiful, understated farewell, a young reporter caught him backstage. "What about that sign?" the reporter pressed. "The one with the tiny ship. What did that mean?" Johnny paused. He didn't make a joke. He didn't deflect or change the subject. He looked directly at the reporter and through the camera delivered his final unexpected lesson to the American people. Johnny smiled, not the broad televised grin, but the soft, genuine expression reserved for moments of true emotional depth. "It means," he said, his voice quiet but clear, "that the most important things we do in this life are never done on camera. They're done for the one person who needs to know they matter." The moment of pure, sentimental storytelling was complete, the dignity of the secret confirmed, and the legacy of the king of late night redefined for all time. That final, quiet observation was the entire beautiful legacy of Johnny Carson, distilled into a single, profound truth. The story of the boy who cried and the ship that was fixed quickly transcended a simple anecdote. For those few who were privy to the intricate details, it became a secret, sacred parable, a testament to the character of the man whose face was, for decades, the final image America saw before going to sleep. The wider public remembers the star, the master of late night who made them laugh for 30 luminous years. But Michael, Sarah, and Ethan carried a different memory, one infinitely more profound. They remembered the man who used his unparalleled power to prove that a father's simple promise was, and would always be, unbreakable. Carson, the public figure, never sought recognition for this extraordinary private intervention. The act was performed not for an audience, but for a family on the brink. He simply leveraged his immense, almost sovereign influence to ensure that a family facing quiet, desperate instability and financial uncertainty found a path back to stability and hope. This was not a move calculated for his legacy. It was an authentic expression of his core belief. The true worth of a man is not, and can never be, measured by the superficial applause of millions, but by the quiet, anonymous acts of kindness, performed for those who stand to offer absolutely nothing in return. What Carson truly demonstrated was an extraordinary capacity for empathy. He showed that when a child's heart is shattered by a broken toy, or by the larger, frightening implications that broken toy represents, the correct and only human response is to immediately kneel down, meet the child at their level, look them directly in the eye, and treat their small, immediate pain with the gravitas and respect of a grand national emergency. The truth is, Carson didn't merely dispatch an assistant to meticulously fix a fragile strut on a plastic toy model. In that single, definitive action, he reached out and fixed a family's entire suspended hope. He took the profound, crippling anxiety symbolized by that shattered ship, the anxiety of separation, the anxiety of deep financial distress, the anxiety that a parent's word might fail, and through sheer will and compassionate effort, he made it whole. It was a masterclass in using fame as a tool for genuine human good. He demonstrated a powerful, unforgettable, and deeply moral truth. Fame, influence, and success are meaningless unless they are actively used to reach out and remind the smallest, most invisible person sitting in the last row that their story matters, that their struggle is seen, and that they too belong. Every single human story is consequential. That is the true, untold narrative of the man behind the desk. The story that few people ever knew. The story that tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the quiet, fiercely loyal heart of Johnny Carson. Finally, we sincerely encourage you to share this heartwarming story with your friends, family, and across your social circles. This is more than just a celebrity anecdote. It is a tale of a father's hope, a child's trust, and a man's integrity that deserves to travel widely. Let others see the true, unguarded heart of a legend and be powerfully reminded of the immense value of quiet, meaningful compassion. Thank you for being an essential and valued part of our community. If this script, detailing Johnny Carson's private act of profound human connection, made you pause, breathe, and reflect on what truly matters in this fleeting life, the profound power of a promise kept, and the quiet, enduring strength of compassion, we urge you to take a brief moment before you click away. Please hit that like button right now. Your immediate support is critical. It helps the algorithms understand that stories celebrating humanity, integrity, and grace like this one are valuable and deserve to be seen by a far wider, more diverse audience.